So I'm just going to go ahead and start in on the answers for the discussion questions, and they're right below. So that's where I'm going to be looking. The first one was, why was Stanton's demand for the vote deemed ridiculous, even by her supporters? And my answer to that is just that the main goal for the women's rights movement in the beginning was to be able to have their own rights, such as wages, property, education, things like that. So, especially when women were married, the man controlled all of these things for them. They didn't have any of these things for themselves. And this was something that they wanted to change. They wanted to be able to have the equal opportunities and their rights. And all of these are stated in the Declaration of Sentiments, which was a speech by Stanton. And in this speech, she brought up the idea of women's suffrage. And this was the first time that someone had said something about this because this was totally unthinkable. It was unheard of. And voting was something that was just for the man, for the white male. And so they felt, so her supporters felt that if they brought up this idea, that their entire movement was going to be deemed ridiculous and that it was going to compromise their other goals because they still wanted these things. They still wanted to have the right to an education, to their bodies, to their own property, to their own wages. They wanted all of these things still, and they felt like putting voting into the mix of that was going to compromise the other goals in the end. The second question was, what does it mean to have the franchise or the vote? And what that means is being able to have the right to vote in a political election. So, this, as we have read and seen in videos for this assignment, was not always the case. So, white males who owned property were the only ones that were able to have the right to vote in political elections or be in politics at all for that matter. And it was over time that this was able to change for many people. So, for African American men, for example, they got this right with the 15th Amendment. And for women, it was still a continuous struggle after African American men got this right. So with the 19th Amendment, that's when women were able to get this right, but it was just white women. So African American women had to continue this struggle to try and get the right to vote just like white women did. And but they had to continue on longer. And then everyone had the right to vote equals in the mid century 20th century, as in African American men and women and white men and women, sorry. So they all had the right to vote mid 20th century. And then that's what that means, is to be able to have the right to vote in a political election. The third question is, how might suffrage change an individual? So suffrage, being the right to vote, can change an individual because it can give someone a voice. It can make them feel like they can make a change. So sometimes people feel like they want to make a change, or they have a voice and they don't know what to do with it. And having this right to vote can give them the opportunity to take that voice and apply it into making a change. So voting is for, like, obviously elected officials. So when you vote for somebody, you're voting for them because you believe in what they're saying and the changes that they want to make. And so if someone is voting for that particular person, then they can feel like they're putting in their voice because they believe in what this person is saying. And it can just make a person feel like they belong, like they have a voice, and they have the ability to make change. The fourth question was, how might suffrage change a social group, meaning like women, African Americans, and Native Americans? So, looking at women more specifically, women had a very long struggle to try and get the right to vote. And for them, it was just a starting point to many other issues that they wanted to fix. And starting with voting with the 19th Amendment in the early 20th century, they got the right to vote. And then this led to many other things as well. But looking even like deeper into that, so like women as a whole got the right to vote, and it changed drastically for them because they got so many other opportunities. But for African American women, they had to continue their fight for the right to vote. So they had to continuously do that. And for them, they were able to then, yes, get more opportunities as well. But they also felt this massive, massive victory being able to stand up for themselves and stand up for their own right to vote, because everyone, white women did. When white women had the right to vote and they didn't. So they just felt like this was a massive victory. And it just, the way it changed a social group is just, they were able to have more opportunities and continue to progress in their movement of itself. And then the last question, could a women's suffrage change American society and how? And I definitely think that that is true. I think that women can change American society. I think that it has. So if we just go back and look for a second at the 19th century, late 19th century and early 20th century with what we've been looking at, we can see that women have started a mass equal rights movement to be able to have equal rights like men. And then the women's voting movement, or women's suffrage movement, excuse me. We look at that and we see that they were able to get the right to vote with the 19th Amendment in the early 20th century. But then if we take a look past that, like, we know all of that, but if we take a look past that, we are able to see that women, after having the right to vote, they were able to start working in other places other than the home. And when they started working in other places other than the home, this led to other things, such as them wanting equal pay as men. They wanted to be able to divide the home, like divide the labor in the home, meaning like that they weren't the only ones taking care of everything inside of the household. And this just continues on throughout history up until present day. Even just this year, we had the first female vice president elected, and that is really huge for the women's movement, because that shows how far women have come within the last 100 years and where they are at in society, because women are continuously moving up and getting in higher positions and having a voice. So, yes, I definitely think that women's suffrage has changed American society, and I think that it's going to continuously change American society in the future. So those are all my answers to the discussion questions. I'm super excited to see what you guys have to say, to see if you have any questions. Very excited to see what your guys' answers are and see if we had any correlation and if we had any differences. So until the next time, see ya.